Hello everyone, I'm Simon Ford of Ford's Gin. Martinis, gin and tonics, Negronis, great classic cocktails is what I'm about, but I also love to hear from great bartenders from around the world, which is why we've partnered with Beyond the Drink for this season. Cheers.
Well, you just heard from the man himself, Simon Ford, and we're glad this season of Beyond the Drink is once again brought to you by our friends at Ford's Gin. I'm Cappy, and in this series, we're going behind the bar. It's time to explore the journeys of the world's best bartenders, uncovering their passion, the latest gin trends, and of course, the social impact they make in their community. Beyond the Drink airs every other week, right here on Beyond the Plate. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you've listened before, we're glad you're back. Let's go Beyond the Drink. Cheers. Today's guest is an inventor, bar owner, operator, educator, award-winning food writer, podcast host, author, and has been called one of the most influential figures in the modern bar world. You know what, Dave? That is a good intro, and I'm going to leave it right there. You can find more on him in the episode notes and follow him on Instagram at Cooking Issues. Please enjoy this episode as we go Beyond the Drink with Dave Arnold. Hi, Dave.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Dave, when you hear people call you one of the most influential figures in the modern bar world, what goes through your mind?
I'm bad at taking compliments, so I just try to just do this. For those who can only hear this, it's just kind of a frightened stare. Look, people have been using a lot of the techniques I've been pushing for a long time, more actually since the pandemic. It's been interesting how it's happened, and it's gratifying, but I don't know.
How do you think your approach has changed how bartenders think about drinks today?
You got to remember there's people actually making drinks, and then there's the way that things are written about and the way things are talked about. And they're not always the same. When I first started doing demonstrations, like a long time ago, even before I opened Booker and Dax, to the outside world, there was a definite two sets of camps, like modern people, and they were associated with molecular gastronomy, which is kind of a nasty word, gross sounding, terrible word. And then there was the cocktail renaissance people, your Audrey Saunders, your Sasha Petrosky, and then the next generation down, like your Jim Meehan and PDT, like this whole group of people who were seen, or Death and Co, Phil Ward, who were seen as being like cocktail renaissance. And it seemed like, that these were two completely separate worlds. In fact, everyone knew each other here in New York. I didn't have a bar at that time. I was teaching people techniques, but I didn't have my own bar yet. And I think we all respected each other, but, it was seen as kind of two separate camps to the outside world. And what was true is very few of the techniques, the modern techniques that now are being used were in heavy usage in a lot of those bars. But they were all interested, especially people like Audrey was always experimenting with new things and doing new things. And I think as time goes on and the techniques become older, and one thing the pandemic did was erase a lot of the old divides. And when that happened, it's kind of like everyone can use everything. There's even things that I wouldn't use, like because I wouldn't do really fat washing until I opened my second bar, because one of the pioneers of fat washing, Don Lee, was my partner in the second bar. So I was like, I can use it now. Or I didn't ever use any foams in my drinks because I was like, that's a Ferran and Spanish invasion thing. And I'm part of this. And I say this all the time. I don't think it's healthy, but I'm part of this generation that wants to innovate in a way that means that like anytime I do somebody else's thing, I'm biting on them, right? So like even like some of the most delicious drinks of like all time, if they're modern, I don't do them. I don't really do classics much either, but like I don't have penicillin on the bar because I know the person who came up with that drink. It's great. It's a fantastic drink. You know what I mean? But it's like, that's not my job.
Interesting.
It's not my job to do somebody else's techniques or drinks. So I do think that that's a mentally poisonous way to think. I can't help it. That's just how I am. You know what I'm saying? Like in other words, like if my son was going to do this, or if anyone younger was getting into it, and I would not advocate to them that they set those rules for themselves because A, it's weird and arrogant, and B, it's like kind of limiting. But on the other hand, we all need something that gets us up out of bed in the morning and keeps us fresh. And for me, it's trying to go down this one path. Not for everybody, though.
That's got to keep it creative and inspiring and interesting for you, though, no? Like you're chasing a new technique.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about it is I think there's a big difference between grabbing a new technique or trying to achieve, most of the time when I come up with a technique, or not always, but most of the time when I come up with a technique, I'm aiming at something. And then either I hit something totally different that I love, that's the fail into success mode, which happens all the time, or I've achieved something I'm trying to achieve. But most of the things that I really like are because I am actively working on an idea, not just kind of grasping at straws or throwing things against the wall or things like that. So I forget where we started with that, but I think there is a difference between, and this is the kind of people who do new things, we get this kind of bad rap that we're doing a bunch of stuff, we don't really know why. And that's why I think the real good practitioners of new techniques, one of the things that you hear them say over and over again is not, here is how to clarify, here's how to whatever, acid adjust, brakes adjust, all the things. Fat wash, that again, that one's not mine, but whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just here's how to do it and then let's just use it willy-nilly for no reason just so that we can. It's like really use all these things with intention, the same way that you would choose a spirit with intention or choose your glassware with intention.
I feel like I could do a whole episode on the many lanes that you are in. Which, do you see them as many lanes?
Oh, it's complicated because, I have a hard time telling anybody what I do for a living.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, they're all part and parcel. Like I could be working on a drink, or I could be working on a piece of equipment, or I could be working on the museum, or I could be working on the book. They're all things that I've chosen because they provide they scratch a specific creative itch that I have. And so to me, they're all kind of similar.
A lot of them are solving something, I feel like, in different ways.
Oh yeah, I love problems. You know what I mean? I don't like having problems. In other words, like I don't like drama, but I like having something that can be solved. You know what I mean? Or something that you can work on.
Okay, so tell everyone what you do.
Well, so I guess my shtick was originally just modern techniques for both cooking and for the bar. I kind of ended up doing a lot of work in the bar just because there weren't as many people doing modern techniques for bar as there were for kitchen. So there was a good niche. It's always smart to choose something that not as many people are doing or have done yet. But before that, I've always been a gearhead, but before that, I was a history guy. So that's why I started the Museum of Food and Drink, which didn't start from the gearhead side of me, although I have built equipment for the museum. It started from kind of my love of food and drink culture in general. So what I do is I like to make things and I like to gather vast amounts of information and I like to learn all the time and I like to discover things that are new to me and or new. And kind of that's it. That's what drives me and trying to do better. I enjoy focusing on weird problems and trying to get better at them beyond the point where most people would think I should stop. You know what I mean? Like beyond what is a reasonable return on my time investment, I still enjoy working on problems, if that makes sense.
Do you feel you're ever truly finished solving something? And if so, how often do you go back to that?
I wrote a book called Liquid Intelligence. Most of it was written like 13 years ago now. And it was published like 10 or 11 years ago. And I'm in the process of going back and looking at all that stuff again. Now, was I dead wrong? No. Have I learned anything? I think that if you haven't learned anything in 12 years, it's like, what a nightmare. And in fact, even though everyone around me hates how long it's taking me to finish the update, I've learned a tremendous amount. You need someone, and this is the problem with bars, the problem with restaurants, is that you don't have the time when you are in active service most people don't have the time to focus on what they could change or what they could have done better or what they got wrong. That's why so many recipes that people have, both kitchen side and bar, have all kinds of unnecessary steps, all kinds of weird little things, because that's the way we developed the recipe 15 years ago. And just we've never had the time to figure out whether every little thing that we do is actually beneficial or not. You just do it because now the recipe's locked down and I got work. The flip side of that is like once someone else is doing your prep for you, they'll sometimes make changes, not tell you. You know what I mean? And so then you have to come to it and then you have to ask yourself, did that change actually hurt the product? Because very rarely do people do side-by-sides when they're doing it or not. And then that gives you a chance to reassess your original recipe, what you did, what you know. Most of the time, we all make implicit assumptions about why a recipe works. based on our intuition. And what I think not enough people do is focus on when that intuition is proved wrong, spending the time to try to figure out why our intuition was wrong. That's what I'm always doing. Like, why was I wrong? Why was that surprising? Why did I get a surprising result? And how can I use that to change how I think such that I get better at kind of all the aspects of what I'm doing? So that's the kind of like mental exercise I like to do when I'm working, where I'm constantly trying to get better and reassess what I think I know already. That's I'm always going to be wrong. There has to be a certain joy in being proven wrong, because it means that you can learn and get better. Not that you weren't good before. The absence of growth is death, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Okay. You kind of dove into this cocktail lane because it was a path less traveled than culinary.
For the stuff I was interested in.
For the stuff you were interested in. How did you come to open Booker and Dax? That was your first bar, yes?
I was at the French Culinary Institute, where my job was to teach new techniques to cooks. We had, I think, the first sous vide class at a professional cooking school in the US, probably. I think it was. I did. I got Wiley Dufresne, my brother-in-law, I got him his first circulator. And so I was there when he started doing sous vide. He was one of the very first people to do it here. So that's part of the reason I got hired into the FCI. And because I had been his equipment guru. I was Wiley's equipment guru because I can fix equipment, right? And then Wiley was also the king of hydrocolloids. So like I knew a lot. I was reading a lot of the same papers and stuff that because we were hanging out. So, I was teaching hydrocolloids. I was teaching sous vide. I was trying to get there was a mad rush for equipment back then, right? So we were all getting like ultrasonic homogenizers and rotary evaporators and anything, including centrifuges. It's ended up becoming like most important for me, right? So after this, mad rush, I realized that there was all these people focused on all of this stuff for the kitchen, not a lot for the bar. So it was just there. But my job was to teach chefs. And then when I left FCI to start an equipment business with Dave Chang, right? We were supposed to build equipment. In fact, I can't tell you what it is, but I still have not built the original piece of equipment I was supposed to build. Building equipment is so complicated. They had this empty space where Milk Bar used to be in the back of Sambar, which was at the time, people forget, like early on, Sambar, everyone thought Sambar was originally supposed to be, which was, for those of you who don't know, he had Noodle Bar. Dave Chang's first restaurant in New York was Noodle Bar, after he came out of like what was considered fine dining. He opens Noodle Bar, where he takes his fine dining mentality and does it in, a place that's like slinging like great noodles, hence Noodle Bar. Then opens Sambar, which he thought was going to be like fast food, like Bosan burritos, and ends up saying to hell with it and doing a late night chef's menu that just kind of went crazy and took off. At that point we were hanging out. So he wants to start a business with me, and then it doesn't, whatever. We don't know how to build equipment. So his partner at the time was like, we got this space where Milk Bar used to be. Christina Tosi, who's now, of course she's Christina Tosi at this point. She had moved out. She's like, to hell with this. I don't want to be in this place behind Sambar anymore. So they're like, we had this empty spot. We're doing $200 a night there, because we're not really running it as a bar. It's basically just a waiting room for Sam, which is always packed and doing the money. So why don't you put a bar in there? At the time, I had all these techniques that I had been teaching at the French Culinary Institute to bartenders, and they would all come up to me and they'd be like, that's all great in theory, but you can't do it in a bar, or that's all great, but you can only do it with restaurant bar, right? It was around the time that Alinea was opening in Chicago. Aviary, which is a bar attached to Alinea in Chicago. And so we were both very cook-centered thinkers in how bar should work, but we took kind of two opposite approaches. So when I opened Booker and Dax, I was like, first of all, we don't have any money. So this place is just going to be what it is. And we're going to dress like how we are. So we weren't like the rest of the cocktail fancy folk, like people dressed like they were. I was like, we're going to hire bartenders, and we're going to teach them how to think in a more like a cooking centered way on how they're going to craft their drinks. We had a lot of bartenders who were also great cooks, like Souther Teague, who, was at Amori Margot, did a bunch of shifts, and he used to work with Alton Brown. So like we always had an affinity for people who also could cook, but wasn't necessary for us, because for us, the point was you're a good bartender because that is a skill. And then we're going to teach you this other way of thinking about drink crafting that is less back bar oriented and more kind of like target flavor oriented, using this kind of battery of techniques that I had been developing and teaching at the French Culinary Institute. So that's how it started. And we were a 32-seat bar, and we were a very bartender bar. And by that, I mean the average person didn't really know us, but a lot of bartenders would come. You know what I mean? Because that's just the kind of joint we were. A lot of first dates, a lot of people got engaged. I loved it. I loved our crew. I loved our guests.
How many bartenders would be on shift in any given night?
So Booker and Dax was so tiny. We had 2 bartenders on busy nights. We ended up being busy a lot, so most of the time we had 2. The reason we made it work is our barbacks did the prep. Our barbacks at Booker and Dax were the greatest barbacks in the world. Then they all knew all of the techniques. And the bartenders cut them some slack because they knew that the barbacks were doing all their mise en place. And so if the bartender had to sometimes go get their own glasses or whatever, they were like, yeah, fine. Because meanwhile, the barback is clarifying all of the juices, doing all of the Justinos, which is a centrifuge liquor that we make. So it was it was an interesting place, and some real like industry monsters came out of Booker and Dax and out of existing conditions. Like I've been very fortunate that a lot of people that have worked at these places have done very well in the bar world.
That's really cool. What makes you happy about creating cocktails?
Well, I like cocktails. So it's always, anytime, I think it's the same with, I guess it's a little different from making a dish, right? Because in a dish, the flow of a dish is different. So like there are times when you're doing like a food, like especially on bakery side, or if you try something new that you're like, oh yeah. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I did something I didn't know I could do it. It's most of the time when you're cooking, it's like small tweaks here or there. Whereas like, and when you're coming up with like, I don't get super excited. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you come up with a cocktail and it's so fast when it's put together, right? So unlike a dish where you're cooking it for a really long time, maybe when you get like some, I don't know, maybe like you get some sort of, imagine a new crustacean or the first time you've ever gotten your hands on like a gooseneck barnacle or something like that. You're just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, so the same thing happens with a cocktail when you have like either a new flavor, a new juice, a new herb to nitro muddle, which is a technique that we do, or some spirit you've never used before. And you just get this combination and it just clicks and you're like, oh, yes. So that happens. That's awesome. But then also sometimes you'll be looking to do something. Like for years, I couldn't clarify ginger well. I couldn't do it. So I figured out how to clarify ginger and I was like, oh yeah, clarify ginger. So like, that's the kind of thing that's like super, super satisfying when you kind of either achieve something new or something unexpected, which I think is probably less common for me in the kitchen at this point than it is in the bar. But like I say, part of it's just the short cycle time, because a cocktail, even if you're working for hours or sometimes days on some ingredients, the actual thing comes together like this. Boop, boop, cha-cha-cha, boom, done. You know what I mean? So
it's just like more analogous to like a sandwich in a way. Like a sandwich just like comes together and you eat it, but some of those components may have taken a while. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think most sandwiches are bad too.
True. Different than like a braised short rib though, that like you're waiting for 2.5 hours.
You're waiting and you can tweak it as it goes. And that's the other problem with the cocktails. Like a lot of times you can't do chefy interventions on a cocktail because, well, for the kind of bars that are here in America, you can't do individual tweaks per drink because you're executing all of these things at once in individual portions. So it's like everything has to be locked down really tight, which makes it hard to do things that are hyper seasonal or are there for a very short period of time, unless it's very limited on a specials menu. Because for me, the worst thing is to have a drink that is like the best drink you've ever had half the time and trash the other half. You know what I mean? Because you can't lock it down. And a straw is a good way to taste whether something's basically balanced, but you can't really, a straw is not even as good a taste as a spoon tastes out of a soup container. You know what I mean? Because at least in a soup container, you're getting the full kind of retronasal. You can bring it up, you can smell the spoon, you can get the texture, you can taste something, you know what I mean, off of a spoon. But a straw, I can just be like, is the rough acid sugar balance okay? You can't, the aromas don't come through, none of this. And so the individual cocktails, the ingredients just have to be very firmly locked down.
Do you think there's a device or product that you can invent to replace tasting a cocktail in a straw? Have you thought about that?
Well, I hesitate to say, there's nothing now Like until like HPLC or like GC mass spec equipment can fit in the palm of our hand and a bartender can have it, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Will it happen eventually? I mean, anyone that says that they know what's going to happen in the future with technology, I think is guaranteed wrong. So I try to stay away from it. But interesting side note that you made me think of, I saw, I don't know, 15 years ago, more maybe, Eric Ripert from Le Bernardin wrote a book. He had an interesting point about tasting, is that you can't trust your own sense of taste. Like for right now, you have a problem with your ear, so it may or may not be affecting your sinuses. You don't necessarily know whether your taste is at 100%. So what he used to do at Le Bernardin, and I thought this was genius, is he chose a particular block of cheese that he could buy again and again that wasn't too strong.
Swiss, right?
The same. I think it was like really crappy level, like Kraft Emmentaler Swiss cheese. And they would all, before they went around and tasted their meals for the day, they would all pop that cheese and be like, okay, now I know where my equipment is for the day.
Dave, it's the best.
Smart.
Yeah, so smart. I tell this story. Funny enough, I've had this cold, as you mentioned, for like over 2 weeks, and I just haven't kicked it. I couldn't smell and taste well, but I had to like cook at home, and I did that. I like bought crappy Swiss cheese, and I'm like, I'm going to see to what level I can taste this Swiss cheese, which is going to affect how I season and cook my food potentially.
So like this whole idea of not trusting your equipment, right, I think is important. I think it's where a lot of people, another place a lot of people go wrong. I think there used to be, I think like testing yourself versus yourself, because you're not the same day to day, is important. But also realizing, I think in the old days, we were kind of taught we had to prove that we had the good palates and that we could make the decisions and don't design by committee. You know what I mean? All of these things. But I think where that falls really flat is in a kind of more modern understanding of how our mouths work, how our brains work. It's not possible for a single individual to be able to know what something's going to taste like to somebody else, especially with bitter components, right? I mean, we can tell, and this is important for cocktails, but also for food, is that even if you and I have different sensitivities to sweetness or sourness or saltiness, right? They're all fairly linear. So I can know that I like food saltier than the average person does, right? Or I can know that you want a drink to be sweeter than I want the drink to be based on the amount of actual sugar I put in. And those can scale linearly. Bitterness doesn't work that way. So things that are bitter, I might taste certain things as being more bitter and you less, and vice versa. So there's no single way to linearize your palate with somebody else's palate. And so the revelation there is that you are not somehow saying that you are not skilled at crafting flavors by taking input from as many people as you can, right? Which is different from designing by committee. It's asking other people what they're tasting and taking what they're saying seriously because their actual tasting equipment is different from you, and trying to come up with drinks that, aren't an outlier for whatever reason in your palate or their palate. So it's like, that's, something I think about a lot more now than I did 10 years ago.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. Is there a cocktail that you created or are making these days that you're really into at the moment?
Ooh, cocktail. I'm currently working on a lot of non-alcs, which I think are interesting because I think they're more complicated usually than alcohol-based cocktails. And what's interesting about them also for me is that they're actually closer for me to the way that people make traditional cocktails in this sense. Like I usually strive towards reducing the ingredient count, right? In bar terms, someone comes to me with a spec and they're like, hey, I made this ingredient in a centrifuge. I'm like, great. And then they're like, and here's the base spirit. I'm like, great. And then they add 3 more modifiers, like 3 different liqueurs to it. I'm like, what are you doing? Nuts? You know what I mean? It's like you spent all this time making this flavor and it's like, why are you muddying the waters here? Just work on the flavors. You know what I mean? Get them right. Whereas in a non-alc, I'm very much about using like lots of components and building them much more like a dish because I'm not worried about respecting a spirit. So I'll have like a fancy ingredient maybe, or expensive, because then people, unobtainium is always good in a non-alcoholic drink, whether it's like some $1 zillion honey from the Yucatan or just some herb or berry that the average person is not exposed to. Those are always good, but I think of it much more like cooking a dish. Whereas with cocktails, I'm very much a fewer ingredients is better. Alcoholic cocktails very much more appreciate a low ingredient count in them, not for speed, but for mental clarity.
Do you have a go-to cocktail?
At my bars or like other bars or at home? At home, I like pretty much wine. Sometimes Cap Course, which is delicious. I make a low alc drink that's actually at the bar called a 2%er for my wife with Chinar. Chinar's good low alcohol. Amaro, because it's super thick, but it's only at like 13.5% alcohol. So even after you water it, like that's why the drink is so low in alcohol. I then bolster it with glycerin, this thing I call champagne acid to give it acidity, and celery seed syrup, because who doesn't like a celery soda? But it's not sweet, right? So a lot of the stuff I've been working on over the past couple of years is ways to lower alcohol, not always because I'm trying to make a low alc drink, but because for things like carbonation, people will enjoy it more if you can drop the alcohol and increase the refreshment of it. So you're still serving a taller drink. You're still serving them the same literal amount of alcohol. It's just in a longer drink. And so I've been developing techniques to do that without having to jack the sugar, which is the normal way to do it. Anyway, I don't know where we're going with this, but I digress. At my bar, there's a drink called the Saltaire that I like a lot because it's a variant on a drink that I made all the way back at Booker and Dax called the Corsair, which was based on preserved lemon. You know, I was going to one of the juice places down near my house 10, 12 years ago, and I got the preserved lemon soda. You know, it's preserved lemon soda with preserved lemon. Like, oh, and the only preserved lemon at the time that I could just go buy, because who was going to wait a month, was the Caloustian Moroccan preserved lemons, like with saffron threads and the nigella. So I just blended them, then spun out most of the pith, and then used that in a split base with lime and simple syrup for a tequila drink. Served it with a tiny beer, Corsair. Great. It's one of my favorite drinks. I made it all the time. Then at Contra, you know, they're like, what are we going to do? And Jeremiah Stone, one of the chefs, the partner there, was like, let's not do the same drink. Let's do it differently. And we're like, okay, what's salty? And he's like, well, because salty tequila stuff's good. And so he's like, well, I have these really nice umeboshi. I didn't know how nice. They're so expensive. They're made by this couple in Japan. They're fantastically expensive. It's crazy. They cost almost as much as the liquor I'm using. Anyway, we did a Justino where we blend the umeboshi with tequila, and then from there on out, it's a pretty straightforward build. But that umeboshi is such a high quality ingredient that it causes you to salivate in the back of your throat. So when you're drinking, you always want the next sip. Love it. Salty tequila, the Saltaire. That's a good drink. That's usually what I get when I go.
Anything exciting to you these days in the world of gin?
Ooh, exciting in the world of gin. I think gin is such a great product. I don't think of it as, I never get excited, but it's always kind of one of my go-tos because it's just so friendly, right? So remember I was telling you I figured out how to clarify, this was a while ago, how to clarify ginger. So first thing I did on the Contra menu was like, okay, we're going to do ginger, turmeric, and galangal, because I've always been obsessed with this mixture of three rhizomes that they're all related, but they're all really different and really fresh tasting. So I clarify those. We have to make a liquor out of them, actually, to clarify them. In order to get a spicy, clarified, uncooked, undried ginger-like thing, you have to put alcohol into it because the spicy stuff isn't soluble in water. Anyway, so the liquor is what it is, but then the rest is gin, because what are you going to mix it with? Gin, right? I mean, could do vodka, gin. So that we actually do use Fords for that one at the bar. This is weird. I'm going to get in big trouble for saying this. I really appreciate gins that drink like old school gins. You know what I mean? And that work, that aren't like one trick pony gins that only work for a couple of things. I love like a good, versatile London dry style gin. And there's nothing wrong with new American style gins or any of these other things. I do like a gin that is relatively high proof. So when some people who shall remain nameless, because who knows whether I have to work with them on it, like when they lower the proof of their gins, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know what I mean? When 86 Coast started, you gotta remember Simon is always been beloved of bar people. You know what I mean? Everyone loves Simon. And he kind of knows all these people all over the world. So when he was starting 86 Co., it was very bartender friendly product. And even though the bottle was fun, it was good, everything was good. You know what I mean? The price was good. As we say in parlance, the juice was good. Like, so I was talking to my wife about that. She's like, why do you keep saying juice? I'm like, what do we call it? The juice. Sometimes we'll say the liquid. Yeah, his tequila was good. I like their rum. I like their vodka. But that stuff's all gone by the wayside. It's gin only now. But Let's not forget, 86Co started as a full roster.
So, Dave, I mentioned before we started recording, our listeners at Beyond the Plate know we celebrate social impact with all of our guests and how the industry gives back to the community. I love learning how all chefs and bartenders and people in the industry do it. I would love for you to take a moment and shed some light on a cause or charitable organization that you will like maybe raise awareness for or have worked alongside. Or
At home, like most of that kind of work goes towards autism and neurodiversity stuff, just because that's big in my family, let's put it that way. But also on a charity side, especially because it's hard to raise money for cultural institutions, like I like to push MoFad, the Museum of Food and Drink. From a bar perspective, an interesting product and I'm not affiliated with them, but an interesting product that everyone can do that does have a charitable hit, even though it's bar, is Saint Benevolence, Clairen, where every bottle of Saint Benevolence, a hefty chunk of the profits. For those who aren't like bar folk, right? Clairen it's Haitian cane spirit. So for lack of a better word, it's like a Haitian agricole situation. And what's fun about Clairen is that they're all incredibly different. You know what I mean? And like they're usually like got a lot of funk on them, a lot of like grassy notes and stuff. And very often the sugar cane is cut and right where it's grown, it's pressed, fermented, and distilled. So it's just like Clairen's real good fun. Saint Benevolence, like a huge chunk of the profits that go back to, because it's the mayor of the town where the sugarcane is grown, is the distiller, goes to fund chemotherapy for people who in Haiti who can't afford it. And I was told that Bar Contra, which is my current bar, like we had purchased enough of it to send someone through an entire course of chemo.
Wow, that's incredible.
So you're like, oh man, what is a nickel going toward chemo? But it turns out that like we had our one small bar like put someone entirely through chemo just by slinging drinks.
That's incredible. Yeah, great work.
All we did was use a product that we already like. I mean, that's the funny thing about like a lot of this is that things like that is we would do it anyway. It just happens to have this bonus thing.
All right. So we have an audio newsletter new on Beyond the Plate here that we call Heard. And basically, I'm sharing a few things on my plate at any given time. It could be a product, ingredient, restaurant recipe, philanthropy related. It's every other Monday right here on the Beyond the Plate podcast platform. But I would love for you to share something on your plate at the moment that I can feature on a forthcoming Heard episode.
So something that other people can put on their plate as well. Not stuff that I just need to knock off my plate because it's there and I'm a member of the Clean Plate Club.
That's right. Clean Plate Club is our other podcast also, by the way, that I do with my children.
Really? For real? Is that still a thing? I feel like you're not allowed to tell people they have to eat everything on their plate anymore.
Yeah, apparently. There's some naysayers of that. But yeah, I got 7-year-old twins and we do some fun. I read recipes like a story time to them and they ask me questions about the ingredients and cooking techniques.
Are your kids picky or are they members of the Clean Plate Club?
They're pretty good. I mean, they're like most kids. They don't love everything, but they definitely are very good at trying things.
Here's a weird thing about kids, right? Like, I don't know about all kids, but like in my experience, like when they're very young, they go through this period where they will eat almost anything. Like I remember my older son was super picky. When he was baby, like fistfuls of capers, just pow. Now it's like, so there's like this mental gap. I think babies are a lot more adventurous than you give them credit for sometimes. And then they lose it for some reason. Who knows? All right. So we're not talking about like having to forcefully clean the plate. We're talking about things I might share on a plate with somebody else.
Yeah, it could be a plate, a restaurant you visited, a drink you had, something, one of your books or places.
Well, obviously you should buy a centrifuge. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding. I hope you go to modernistpantry.com and buy one of our Spinzall centrifuges, but honestly, only if that's what you need. I don't think that the average person should have a centrifuge in their house. Average bar? Maybe. What is something that I've just recently had that I feel like I can't live without? Oh, all right. Have you had this yet?
No. It's like a fish sauce?
I think they're going to start going into bigger production. It's Maine Garum Company. And so there are a couple people like Mitika is making like an old school fish sauce. It's very garum-like. But this one's out of Maine. I was giving a talk with Harold McGee at Harvard a couple of weeks ago. And he was like, hey, I have a bottle of this fish sauce. Sally Granger, who's kind of the grand guru of fish sauce Roman style garum fish sauce. That's her PhD is in it, and she's the stuff, right? So he also likes her, but I've had her stuff. And the closest to that Roman style garum that you normally could buy was this Japanese product called Ashiri out of Ishikawa. And this stuff is real good, and I think you can buy it here. But, oh man.
I gotta look that up.
Normally fish sauce, I love fish sauce, by the way. I love all fish sauces. I'm not trying to say better or worse than. This one, like some of the prime Ashiris that you can get, has a very specific meat, not fish, meat taste. Like canned meat, like deviled ham taste, which is just awesome. There's a similar one that tastes a little bit different, also Japanese, but not from there, called Ayu fish sauce. Both of the Japanese, any Ashiri, my favorite Ashiris are squid based. This one is eel guts, which is kind of cool. It's the first eel gut one I've ever had. I think I probably a dead eel head on it. But full gut fish sauces are the best. From Japan, squid. And by the way, even in Roman times, full gut fish sauces were like whole fish, like with all the guts, were the high end sauces as opposed to kind of the leftovers. And yeah, so I think it's a good product. It's new.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Dave, this was fantastic. Could probably keep this going for a while if I didn't have to pick up my children at school in a minute. But thank you to you and honestly, this whole cocktail and bartending community, because I really enjoyed connecting with you all. Appreciate everything you have to say. This was incredibly eye-opening. And can you just share where people can find you?
Well, I don't post as much as I should. My social media is Cooking Issues on Instagram, not on Twitter anymore, but I'm on Instagram. Or, I have a bar Contra on the Lower East Side, 138 Orchard Street. Right now, the Museum of Food and Drink, which is in the Empire Stores over in Brooklyn. We don't have an exhibit up now. We're deinstalling and reinstalling, but look in that space soon. And I have a podcast called Cooking Issues that you can get on any good podcast platform. And I've been doing it for, infinity.
At least. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Find all social media links for myself, Beyond the Plate, and Beyond the Drink guests in the episode notes and on beyondtheplatepodcast.com. As always, big thanks to the whole Beyond the Plate team. Don't forget to join us back here next Wednesday for an episode of Beyond the Plate and every other Monday right here for Heard, our short audio newsletter where I'm sharing what's on my plate from culinary insights to restaurants and recipes, all in just a few minutes. And if you have a moment, we'd be grateful for your support by rating, reviewing, and even hitting that subscribe button to the podcast. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Drink, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.